The moment Elias stepped into the fast food restaurant, he knew something was wrong. The air felt unusually heavy, as if an invisible fog of tension was hanging over everything. Employees looked drained, so fatigued their eyes no longer carried any light. Customers shifted impatiently, some tapping their fingers on the tables, others exchanging annoyed glances. This wasn't what Elias had expected. Not at all. But Elias wasn't just another customer. He was the CEO behind a 10-location burger chain, a business empire he built by acquiring failing establishments and turning them into success stories. 3 years ago, he had bought this franchise with the hope of breathing new life into it. He'd handed over day-to-day operations to a district manager he once trusted completely. But recently, complaints had begun piling up. Rude staff, sluggish service, and most disturbingly, rumors of internal bullying. Elias had never been the kind of man to rely solely on reports. He needed to witness the truth for himself, to feel the fatigue in the air, hear the sighs of weariness, and see the distant, checked-out looks in his employees' eyes. So he disappeared. He became Leo, a quiet, middle-aged man with graying hair, a limp in his walk, and a pair of old, scratched glasses. On paper, Leo was a former warehouse worker trying to start over after years of unemployment. No one questioned him. No one looked twice. To most of the staff, corporate leadership was nothing more than names on emails and paychecks. No one cared what the CEO looked like. Now, Elias, disguised as Leo, stood behind the register in an oversized, poorly fitted uniform, observing everything. The lunch rush hit like a storm, orders piled up, the kitchen was clearly understaffed. And at the center of the chaos stood Travis, the store manager, a burly man with a booming voice, barking orders like a drill sergeant, yet not lifting a single finger to help. "Hustle, people, this isn't a damn daycare," Travis bellowed, irritation dripping from every word. The boy, 16 at most, flinched. His dark curls fell into a soft, baby-faced expression filled with fear. He carried a tray with trembling hands, clearly struggling to stay balanced. His name tag read, Dylan. "You serious right now?" Travis snapped. "You carry a tray like a toddler learning to walk." Dylan flushed deep red. He turned quickly, probably praying he could deliver the order and disappear. But fate wasn't kind. His foot snagged on a rubber mat, and one of the drinks toppled. Soda exploded across the counter in a sticky mess. A few customers turned to look. Others pretended not to see. But shame like that doesn't just belong to one person. It spreads, staining the entire room. Travis let out a theatrical groan, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "Unbelievable. You can't even carry a tray? What are you, useless?" The room went silent, not from shock, but from recognition. This wasn't the first time. This wasn't new. It was routine. Dylan bent down, eyes fixed to the floor, frantically grabbing napkins with shaky hands. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Elias clenched his fists. He'd seen poor leadership. He'd seen laziness. But this? Publicly humiliating a kid like that? This wasn't incompetence. This was cruelty. Still, he couldn't blow his cover, not yet. If he revealed himself too soon, he'd never get to the root of the problem. So instead, he picked up a mop and crouched beside Dylan. "You okay?" Elias asked quietly, his voice a rare softness in a space filled with sharp edges. Dylan nodded, barely, "Yeah, just trying to keep up." But Elias didn't believe it. The kid's hands still trembled. That wasn't exhaustion. That was fear. A deep, paralyzing fear of being seen, of being noticed, and being punished for it. Before Elias could say anything else, a voice rang out from the front counter. "Excuse me?" a woman said sharply, arms crossed. "I've been waiting 10 minutes. Travis rolled his eyes and turned toward Elias, like tossing a problem away. "Leo?" Take her order. Maybe you won't screw it up like the kid. Elias stepped up, calm and steady. Of course, ma'am. What can I get for you today? As he rang up the order, he glanced over his shoulder at Dylan, still hunched over the counter, wiping up soda with empty eyes. No complaint, no reaction. As if he had learned that silence was the only way to survive. Elias had seen enough, for now. This wasn't just a poorly managed restaurant. This was a broken ecosystem, poisoned from within, and that poison was seeping into the youngest, the quietest, the ones least able to defend themselves. He understood now that fixing procedures wouldn't be enough. He had to save the people first. Not as a CEO, but as someone who had once known what it felt like to be overlooked, to wish someone, anyone, had stepped in. For the rest of the shift, Elias said almost nothing. He kept his head down, but his eyes missed nothing. Every movement, every expression, every strained breath. The restaurant didn't operate like a team. It moved like a battered machine, powered by silence and fear. Travis ruled through intimidation. He yelled but never worked. He gave orders but never guidance. Employees didn't dare ask questions. They didn't dare speak at all. They moved like shadows, exhausted, voiceless, disconnected. And Elias felt every inch of it settle in his chest like a weight. This place wasn't failing by accident. It was collapsing because it had been abandoned, not physically, but morally. And now he knew without a doubt he was going to tear it all down and rebuild it from the ground up. In the kitchen, where the heat often surpassed even the patience of those working, Elias stood beside a middle-aged man named Hector. The man flipped burger patties with a precision so practiced it had become nearly robotic. Sweat trickled from his temple, but his hands never stopped moving. It was as if the moment he paused, the entire kitchen would collapse. Elias noticed something deeper in Hector's eyes. Exhaustion, yes, but more than that, a quiet resignation, the kind that comes from a man who's carried too much for far too long. "How long have you been working here?" Elias asked gently, keeping his tone casual. Hector nodded without looking up. 5 years. Elias raised an eyebrow. "You're the shift lead?" Hector let out a short breath, not quite a laugh, but not quite a sigh either. "No, just a cook." That was all Elias needed to hear. 5 years on the job, and still just a cook? No promotion, no recognition? A glaring red flag in a system that had grown far too comfortable ignoring the value of the people holding it up. Across the kitchen, Dylan was stationed at the fryers. The boy avoided eye contact with Travis like prey sensing a predator nearby. Every time Travis passed, Dylan's body tensed, bracing for a reprimand, whether he'd done anything wrong or not. And then it happened. Dylan rushed to lift the fryer basket too early. His grip slipped, and boiling oil splashed onto his wrist. He let out a sharp gasp, recoiling instinctively, clutching his reddening skin. Elias stepped toward him immediately, but Travis got there first. "Oh, for crying out loud! What now?" Travis shouted, his face twisted in mock agony, as if Dylan's pain was an inconvenience to him. I slipped," Dylan mumbled, his voice trembling. Travis rolled his eyes. "Yeah, well, that's on you. Don't slow us down. Get back to work." Elias held his breath. That was the moment he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. "Where's the first aid kit?" Elias asked quickly, turning to Hector. Hector hesitated for a second, then pointed toward the storage room in the back. Without another word, Elias gently took Dylan by the arm and led him away. "Let me see," Elias said softly. Dylan shook his head, trying to hide the burn. "I'm fine, really. I can keep working." "Look at your hand," Elias said, firm now. "It's bright red. Let me take care of it." Finally, Dylan extended his arm. Elias found the first aid kit on a nearby shelf, pulled out a burn ointment, and carefully applied it to the swollen skin. Dylan's hand trembled as Elias worked, the pain evident in every shallow breath. "Does this happen often?" Elias asked quietly as he wrapped the injury. Dylan gave a small shrug. "Sometimes." Elias frowned. "No gloves?" Dylan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was the answer. Elias pressed his lips together. His chest ached. No protective gear, no concern for management, just indifference, just negligence. This wasn't just poor leadership. This was systemic carelessness, a culture where basic safety was overlooked, where pain was dismissed as weakness. When they returned to the kitchen, Travis stood with his arms crossed, watching them with thinly veiled contempt. "Done playing doctor?" he sneered. Elias kept his tone level. The kid burned himself. He needed first aid. Travis scoffed. "He'll live." Elias clenched his fists. He fought the urge to lash out. Not yet. He still needed to stay undercover a little longer. But inside, anger simmered like a flame beneath the surface. Waiting. At the end of the shift, Hector pulled Elias aside near the back exit. "You're new, so let me give you some advice," Hector said quietly. "Keep your head down. Travis doesn't like waves." Elias met his eyes. "And what about you?" Hector looked away, voice low. "I've got a family to feed. I can't afford to lose this job." Elias nodded slowly. He understood. Not everyone had the privilege to stand up. As he stepped outside, the cool night air brushed against his face, but his heart no longer felt cold. He knew what he had to do. Tomorrow, he wouldn't just be watching. He'd start pulling the entire system apart, piece by rotten piece. The next morning, Elias arrived early. He slipped into his uniform with quiet determination. Today, he was going to test the limits, to see just how far Travis could go unchecked, and more importantly, to see if anyone had the courage to finally say, "No." The morning shift was calmer, not as rushed as lunch or dinner. It gave Elias the chance to move between stations, observing more closely. At the prep counter, Hector was slicing tomatoes. The knife in his hand was old, the handle chipped, the blade clearly dull. The cutting board was worn thin, the sink was stained with grease, and the industrial refrigerator's flickering light blinked like it was on life support. "Do they ever replace equipment around here?" Elias asked. Hector's knife paused for a beat, then resumed. "If it completely breaks, maybe. That said it all. No maintenance, no investment, no care." The first wave of customers began trickling in, commuters grabbing breakfast, parents picking up meals for their kids. Elias manned the register, taking orders while keeping an eye on Dylan. The boy moved more cautiously than the day before, but his body remained tense, like a wire stretched too tight. Every time Travis walked by, Dylan stiffened instinctively. Then a woman stepped up to the counter, clearly annoyed. "My order's wrong," she said, placing her tray down firmly. "I asked for no bacon." Elias checked the receipt. She was right. He nodded calmly. "Let me take care of that for you." But before he could turn away, Travis cut in. "What now?" His tone was already loaded with irritation, even though the woman had barely spoken. "I said no bacon," she repeated. Travis sighed heavily, snatching the tray from the counter. "You sure? The screen says with bacon." Elias stepped in, his voice firm and clear. "The receipt says no bacon." Travis shot him a sharp glance, then turned to the customer. "Fine, we'll remake it," he shouted toward the kitchen. "Dylan, 1 sandwich, no bacon." Dylan hesitated for half a second, then rushed to work. Elias observed closely. It wasn't just Dylan's speed or tiredness that caught his attention. It was the way Travis handled the situation, not just with impatience, but with a subtle shift of blame, as if Dylan were at fault for a mistake that had come from the top. When the corrected sandwich was handed off, the woman left without another word. But the moment her back was turned, Travis leaned toward Dylan and muttered just loud enough to sting, yet quiet enough to hide from others. "Pay more attention next time." Dylan's face tightened. He pressed his lips together and nodded. No protest, no voice, just silence again, his shield to survive. Around midday, Elias saw an opening. Travis had stepped into the office. Elias turned to Hector and asked in a low voice, "Always like this?" Hector didn't even look up, focused on placing a fresh batch of patties on the grill. "Far as I know, yeah, been that way since I got here." "No one's ever reported him?" Hector let out a dry, bitter chuckle. "You think they haven't tried? Complaints go straight to upper management, but Travis has connections. No one touches him." That was it. The final piece of a broken puzzle Elias had spent 3 days piecing together. This wasn't just poor leadership from someone out of their depth. This was systemic rot, a place where the guilty were protected and the voices of the hurt were buried. That ended today. As the lunch rush hit like a tidal wave, Elias worked faster than ever. He kept pace with orders, scanning every corner of the kitchen. He waited for the perfect moment, that sliver of time when Travis was most comfortable, most confident, most oblivious. And then, right in the heart of the chaos, orders stacking, alarms beeping, voices raised, Elias stepped out from behind the counter and slowly removed his name tag. Travis didn't notice right away, too busy barking at staff. But then Elias spoke, his voice low, steady, and commanding. "Travis." Travis looked up, frowning. "What? We're slammed right now." "Office. Now." Travis snorted, clearly amused. "You serious? This is the peak hour." Elias took one step closer. His voice dropped an octave. "I said now." Something in his tone made Travis freeze. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Elias reached up and took off his glasses. Hector froze mid-splice. Dylan's eyes widened. The room fell still. No one said a word, but the silence was electric. Travis took half a step back. "Wait, you're..." Elias didn't let him finish. "I'm Elias Carter, CEO of this restaurant chain, and I've been working here side by side with your team for the past 2 days, watching every move you make." The air collapsed into total silence. It was as if every sound in the kitchen had been vacuumed out. Travis stood frozen. His mouth opened and shut like someone realizing a nightmare had just become real. "Office now." The door closed behind them with a heavy thud. The noise of the restaurant faded. It was just the two of them, one man who held all the power and one who was beginning to realize he had none. Travis stood by the desk, arms crossed, trying to look composed, but the tension in his eyes betrayed him. Elias stood by the door, not as Leo, but as the man who could dismantle Travis's career with a single word. "So it's true. You're the boss," Travis muttered, trying to sound casual. "Now what?" Elias didn't answer right away. He stepped forward, calm but cutting, his gaze unwavering, like a mirror reflecting everything Travis had refused to see. "You tell me. I've watched you humiliate your staff, ignore safety standards, and treat customers like a burden. So tell me, is this how you run this place every day?" Travis swallowed hard. His voice trembled slightly. "It's a fast food joint. What did you expect? Fine dining? Around here it's survive or sink." Elias shook his head. "No, that's an excuse. You're not managing this place, you're grinding it into the ground. You don't lead, you intimidate." Travis clenched his fists, voice rising. "If I don't stay on them, they slack off. Half these kids don't even want to be here." Elias took another step forward, his voice colder now. "Dylan got burned. Not because he was careless, but because he didn't have protective gloves, and he was too scared to speak up. Travis went quiet for a beat, but still tried to defend himself. Things happen. I can't babysit everyone on the floor. Elias locked eyes with him. I don't need you to be a babysitter. I need you to be a leader. That line hit Travis like a slap to his fragile pride. You've been here long enough to know what leadership looks like, but instead of lifting people up, you push them down. Instead of fixing problems, you blame the people under you. You've held on to this job because you've got friends in high places, not because you've earned it. Travis squared his shoulders, trying to salvage what little pride he had left. So what now? You gonna fire me? Elias didn't answer right away. He let the question sit in the cramped room. Then, calmly but firmly, You're done. Travis drew a sharp breath, masking his fear with a bitter laugh. So a big-shot CEO spends 2 days here and suddenly thinks he knows everything? Elias opened the door, his hand still on the knob. I know enough. And I know this isn't just about you. It's about every person you've walked over to hold on to this job. And that ends today. He stepped out, leaving Travis standing alone. No one left to command, no mask left to hide behind. As Elias returned to the kitchen, the atmosphere felt thick, like the heavy silence before a summer storm. Every pair of eyes turned to him, not because he was the CEO, but because they had just witnessed something they never thought would actually happen. Elias walked out of that office not just with authority, but with a choice, not the weight of his title, but of the moment. He glanced around at the faces watching him. The silence was no longer fear, it was anticipation. Dylan stood near the fryer, shoulders still slightly hunched from habit. Hector wiped his hands on a worn towel, his expression unreadable. The rest of the crew stood motionless, but their eyes were different now. Elias spoke. His voice didn't need volume to carry weight. Every word landed like a drumbeat. Travis is no longer your manager. A ripple of reaction moved through the room. Some exchanged looks. Others just stood frozen, unsure if this was real or temporary. Elias scanned the team. His eyes stopped at Hector. I need to know, who's really been keeping this place running? Hector hesitated for a moment, then spoke honestly. Mostly the crew. The shift leads try, but they don't really have authority. Elias nodded, a plan already forming. It's changed today. He turned fully to Hector. Starting now, you're the interim manager. Hector's eyes widened. His hands were still holding the towel, as if waiting for someone to say this was a mistake. Elias nodded firmly. You've been here 5 years. You know this store better than anyone, and from what I've seen, the team trusts you. Hector looked around the room, unsure whether to believe it. Then slowly, cautiously, he nodded. Not with confidence, but with resolve. Right? Elias turned to Dylan. Have you ever received proper training? Dylan shook his head, eyes cast down. Elias exhaled, his tone softening. That changes today. Are you willing to learn? Dylan looked up. This time, his voice was clearer. Yeah. Elias gave a small nod and turned to the rest of the crew. I know the last few days have been hard, but I'm not here to punish anyone, except the people who deserve it. From this point forward, things will be different. For real. The room shifted. The fear hadn't disappeared, but something lighter was creeping in. Hope. Elias turned back to Hector. We'll review everything, staffing, training, equipment, make a list of what's broken and what needs to be replaced. Hector nodded instantly, already switching into problem-solving mode. Elias looked back at Dylan, his voice steady. And you, if you need gloves, ask. Got it? Hated. Dylan gave a small but genuine smile. Got it. Elias took a step back and looked at the whole team once more. These were people who had survived in a system that crushed them, conditioned to follow rather than grow. But from this moment on, things would be different. Without another word, Elias took out his phone and headed to the front of the store. There were calls to make, changes to set in motion. This couldn't be about just one location. The entire system had to change. Travis couldn't be allowed to exist anywhere else. Elias called the district manager, HR, and the supply chain team. He ordered a freeze on all operations at the store until critical equipment was replaced. He scheduled retraining for staff and requested a full internal investigation into how Travis had gone unchecked for so long. When Elias returned to the floor, the air had shifted. Hector was showing another employee how to properly organize ingredients. His voice was calm, instructional, not a hint of the harshness Travis once ruled with. Dylan was still at the fryer station, but he was moving with steady focus, not frantic anxiety. Elias approached quietly and asked Hector, "How's it going?" Hector glanced around, then replied, "They're adjusting. It's quieter now." Elias nodded. "That's a good start." He turned to leave, then paused. "Anything I should know?" Hector hesitated, then spoke in a low tone. "We're short-staffed. Travis ran people off. Some quit without notice. The ones who stayed didn't have much choice." Elias nodded. He understood. A toxic workplace doesn't just make people afraid. It drains them of hope. "We'll hire more people. But first, we need to make sure the ones who stayed actually want to stay." Hector glanced toward Dylan, who was now working with more composure. Elias caught the look in Hector's eyes and asked, "What are you thinking?" Hector exhaled softly. "That kid's got potential, but he's been walking on eggshells since day one. I don't think anyone's ever really taught him." Elias walked over to Dylan. Dylan startled, turning around quickly as if expecting to be reprimanded. "Just show me what you're doing." Dylan looked confused. What do you mean?" "Just walk me through it." Dylan hesitated, then slowly began explaining. He pointed to the timer, described the correct oil temperature, and how he shakes the fryer basket so nothing sticks. Elias nodded along. Then asked, "What if the fries come out too dark?" Dylan frowned slightly, thinking, "Check the oil temp. If it's too hot, lower it. Also make sure the previous batch didn't sit too long before going in." Elias gave an approving nod. "That's exactly right." Dylan straightened a bit. For the first time, he didn't look like he was bracing for criticism. Elias turned to Hector. "You were right. The kid's got real potential." Hector gave a small shrug, like he'd known it all along. Just no one ever asked. Elias checked the time. He needed to head back to the office, but there was still one last thing. He turned and raised his voice just enough for everyone to hear. "Tomorrow, before we open, we're having a meeting. Everyone's invited. I want to hear from you, really hear. What needs to change?" A few employees exchanged uncertain looks. Some were surprised. Hector folded his arms. "You really want to hear from us?" Elias met his gaze. "If I don't, one day we'll have another Travis. And I'm not letting that happen again." Hector nodded, his expression unreadable, but something shifted in his eyes. Maybe it was hope, maybe trust. Whatever it was, Elias could feel it. He walked toward the front door. There was still so much to fix. One visit wouldn't undo years of damage, but for the first time since he'd stepped into this place, Elias knew one thing with absolute certainty. This restaurant had been broken for a long time, but now it had finally begun to heal. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where every story is a chance to reflect, to heal, and to reclaim what once felt lost.